kick off my Friday.
Absolutely.
Meeting
Good
has
morning.
officially started.
All right. Good morning, everybody. We're welcome. We're going to let a few more people in before we kick off formally, but welcome and thanks for being here with us today on this first day of November.
I can't believe it's November.
I know it really goes by quickly, doesn't it? Like just
It
crazy
does.
quickly. Jason, would you mind putting up the slide? Thank you. Okay, I just like to give it a couple minutes. We're just at a minute past the hour, so I'll give it another minute or two. If anybody wants to use the chat to tell us where you're coming in from. I'm based in Atlanta. Amanda, you're in Austin, and Dash, you are in the Bay Area, but I don't know specifically more than that.
I'm in Oakland.
Oakland, there you go. Hi, Ed, Memphis. Nick is coming in from Baltimore. Nicholas from Baltimore.
My old
Jenny
stomping grounds.
That's right, Gainesville. Yeah. Natasha in Columbus, Ohio. Ivana in Buffalo Grove. I've seen, Amanda, that the Ravens seem to have a shot, is what I'm hearing in football. I have no idea.
Well, I also, like, to be fair, I'm actually a Chicago Bears fan. So Ravens are my second team. So my family's from Chicago. So I am a Bears fan and so whomever is in Buffalo Grove, you probably are as well.
Yeah, my daughter is, and she grew up in Chicago, so a big Bears fan, which I understand is thankless.
Thankless, yes, every year.
So, but you know, my brother is a Jets fan and equally thankless. Okay. All right. So I'm going to kick us off. Let me just see if there's something else going on in the chat right now. Okay, let's get started. Buffalo. Okay, that's another big football area. So welcome everybody to the CoachSource First Friday webinar for November, and thank you all very much for joining us today. Give a particularly warm welcome to our current CoachSource clients, as well as our not yet clients on the call joining us today. I'm Mary Dombrowski. I am SVP of Client Engagement with CoachSource, leading both our current client service teams, as well as creating new client relationships. For those of you not familiar with CoachSource, we are the largest pure play global executive coaching firm. We have been in business for 18 years. We have over 1,200 coaches that we deploy globally for senior leadership transformation in some of the best known organizations, typically at the director level and above, including C-suite and board. CoachSource hosts webinars such as this typically on the first Friday of every month. At CoachSource, we believe that inspiring leadership transforms organizations. Our monthly gatherings are dedicated to empowering HR business partners and leaders of talent inside organizations with insights, strategies, and expert guidance on leveraging executive coaching to drive organizational excellence. And if you have any specific topics you would like to see us cover, feel free to email me, mary@coachsource.com. I would love to hear from you. This month, our topic is empowering leadership growth, HRBPs as change agents through executive coaching. Leading our conversation is our Vice President of Client Service, Amanda Layden, and a very special guest, Deshini Jayathora, who is the Senior Director of Development and Employee Experience at Upstart, which is also a valued CoachSource client. Prior to joining Upstart, Dash spent 9 years at Google. She began her career at Google in customer service operations and vendor management, but her passion for learning and development led her to Google's people development team, where she had the opportunity to work on onboarding, ongoing development, as well as manager and leadership capability building. Welcome, Dash. We are so pleased to have you here with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Amanda Layden recently joined CoachSource as Vice President Client Services and oversees our client service team. Amanda brings 20 years of experience advising and consulting with organizations on leadership, strategy, and revenue growth. She has worked with organizations from startups to enterprise level and across diverse industries, including healthcare, health tech, pharma, wine, beer, and spirits, hospitality, and others. So thank you, Amanda, for leading the conversation today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Amanda, for your conversation with Dash.
Thanks so
And
much,
Jason,
Mary.
we can take that slide down. Thank you.
Dash, well, as Mary said, we're super excited to have you here today and to tap into your wealth of experience over the years. So let's just kick it off on framing the conversation today. For those HRBPs and talent leaders that are here, how do you think about, in your experience, aligning executive coaching with broader business strategy to ensure that you're driving impactful outcomes?
Great. Well, thanks for having me, both of you. I'm excited to be here and excited to have the conversation with you. I think that's a really excellent kickoff question, Amanda. I think the first thing is when we as talent leaders, and full disclosure, not an HRBP, but a talent leader, and hopefully will still be useful to folks on the call. As a talent leader, I think the first thing that you want to be doing is identifying what are the strategic priorities of your organization. And that is going to really be dependent on what stage the company is in. What are some of the most critical needs for your leaders? And I think the second piece, which I think is a really important one, is identifying, besides having the organization's strategic goals front and center, identifying what are the leadership competencies needed to achieve them. Um, and one of the things that I think we've been very fortunate at Upstart is that we have a really clear sense of what those leadership capabilities are, what it takes to be a really successful senior leader and at Upstart. And when you have those leadership competencies very clearly outlined, both for yourself as a talent leader, and it is really clearly outlined to the senior leaders who are at the company, I think that is when you are able to really align the executive coaching with the business strategy, because you know what the business deems important at that stage of the company's growth. And I will give a really concrete example of that, which is when you have those leadership competencies which are aligned to the business priorities. You can have very open conversations with the coaching partner that you are working with, and with the coaches who are supporting the leaders at the company about what it takes to be successful there. And that really helps your coaches align how they are supporting senior leaders at the company. So I think that is one really important way to sort of align the executive coaching with the business strategy. I think the leadership competencies are really critical linchpin there.
That's fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. I might come back to that in a little bit in terms of just because organizations are changing so quickly right now, which brings me to my next question. But let's park the competencies for a second, because I'm sure there's some questions with folks, with talent leaders about how you've managed to do that. And especially coming from somewhere like Google and now being at Upstart, what that process looks like as you're thinking about developing those leaders. But let's talk about that change and the complexity. So businesses, we know the thing that's constant right now is change. So all businesses are facing volatility, complexity, and change. How should talent leaders and HRBPs adapt executive coaching programs to remain relevant and responsive to these changing demands?
So I think the first couple of words that come to mind for me, Amanda, with that question is agility and flexibility. Um, And I think it is so critical to be able to adapt to the evolving needs of a company, right? The company that and the leaders that you are supporting. I've, for example, been at Upstart for 3 years, right? The leaders that you are supporting in 2021 are different from the leaders you are now supporting in 2024. The growth they have experienced, the changes that the company has experienced. So I think being agile and flexible about that is really important. And I will say, this is something that you can come across with some talent leaders. a very firm idea of how to support senior leaders. And that can sometimes be to our detriment. If we have a very particular way we want to support them, if there is a very fixed mindset on what a successful executive coaching program might look like, etc. So I think really training ourselves to be agile and flexible to the needs of the organization. And I will say, as a talent leader, one way that I try to do that is by staying very close to our HRBPs, because they, I sit as a leader of a COE, but they are front and line with the business every day. And so I stay really close to my peer, who is our HRBP leader, to make sure that I'm understanding what are the common themes, what are the common challenges that leaders may be experiencing. So when you are bringing solutions or programs to a senior leader population, that you have what is top of mind for those leaders embedded in your strategy. So I think agility and flexibility is one. I think two, staying very close to the HRBP community that you have at your company in order to make sure you have a really strong pulse on the business. I think another thing that is really critical to sort of stay relevant and to adapt to changing demands is really thinking about what are some of the future skills that your leaders need in the next stage of growth. And this is obviously very different depending on the company that you're at, and the particularities of your company. So one of the things that I think about is, as a talent leader, is Upstart is a digital first company. And so this means we have Upstarters located across the country, and we come together periodically at one of our three offices when we are working on gnarly problems, when we have on-sites. But right, this is a distributed team, and that is a future skill that we continue to need to invest in for all our leaders, no matter what level they're at. And so thinking about what are the future skills for your organization's next phase of growth. And then the last thing that I would say, in order to stay relevant and to adapt to sort of changing demands, is thinking about what is the technology that you need to support leaders in new and different ways. And this is something that perhaps I think the sort of your coaching partner or coaching firm that you're working with typically will be hopefully sort of front and center or the cutting edge of this, thinking about how can we meet leaders where they are at. With the advances in AI, I am curious about how that is going to reshape coaching and how that is going to change how leaders maybe engage with coaches. So I am curious about that. I don't have a great point of view on that, but I'm sort of eager to see how that evolves.
Thinking about the future, you mentioned agility and change and obviously AI and tech. As you're thinking about coaching as an intervention or modality to support leaders, are there any other themes that are cropping up that you have your eye on in terms of what skills leaders might need to be coached for or to, or anything else that you're looking at that's coming down the pike outside of AI?
Yeah, I think so. AI certainly is going to be an interesting disruptor in this space. I think there are some I think there are some skills that stay the same, that are a constant, in which that is something, whichever organization you go to, that is something that you are likely to see that leaders will need to grow and develop in. And for starters, I would say it is still not uncommon for really incredible individual contributors to become leaders. And so that continues to be an area where leaders will always need support and investment in, moving from being a very successful individual contributor to now someone who is not just managing work, but leading, inspiring their team, enabling their team success. And that is that is a tough shift to make, right? Many of us early in our career get lots of value from the work we produce, and now you are in a leadership role. So I think that is a space that stays the same. I think we've been talking about that for many years, that it's one that we continue to invest in. I will say, sort of going back to what I mentioned about Upstart being a digital first environment, I know there's sort of been a pendulum shift where we see more leaders saying, I want folks back in the office 5 days a week. I still do think we have a significant number of companies and workforces that are distributed, right, post pandemic. And I think that is a skill set I don't think we have fully, senior leaders have fully grasped. And that might be the reason why you have this pendulum shift of folks saying, well, we all need to be back in the office again, because that is not, I think, an area of strength across the board. So I think that is an area worth keeping an eye out on. How do you inspire? How do you lead? How do you ensure productivity and business outcomes when you are not sitting in the same place, in the same office? And so that's one that I'm excited to see how we continue to invest as a talent community in helping leaders get there. And I think the last thing that I would say, going back to that AI piece, Amanda, that you brought up, is how are leaders infusing that into their pieces of work? How are they infusing that into their organizations? What level of comfort do they have with that? I think AI is here to stay, and I don't think we've even begun to scratch the surface of what is possible. And so making sure that leaders, and this is not to say they have to be experts in the space, but that they have a curiosity about it, and are eager to see, how can I leverage that? How can I use that in a way that is going to advance my organization's business priorities? So those are a few things that come to mind.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. So thinking about that and some of the skill sets that you were talking about that are top of mind for coaching and really ensuring these leaders are successful, how do you then determine the right moment to introduce executive coaching into the leadership or talent development process?
Yeah, it's a great question, Amanda. And I would say executive coaching, from my perspective, is it's usually a when and not an if. And so a talent leader coming to a new company, it's not to say that that is the first thing you sort of unleash or deploy in the organization, but knowing that there will be a point where you need to be thinking very seriously about this, and who is going to be your coaching partner and what is the program. So I think it is one of those things, if you are joining a company as a new talent leader, sort of getting a sense of the landscape and sort of readying yourself for when that request is going to come your way, and not if that request is going to come your way. The second thing that I would say is really important is, this is one of those things that I would not push onto an organization. It's one where you want to wait for the pull. And that's why it is helpful to be ready in the background with, I do have a plan and a program and a partner that I think would be great for us. But this is not something that I would sort of push on an organization until you are hearing, hey, I think there's a need for this. I would love to accelerate a leader's success and progress in a particular space. And I think an executive coach would be really helpful. A couple of other things that I would add there is, executive coaching is something that it is an accelerant. And I find that it most typically, here are a few examples where you are likely to see a pull from the business for executive coaching. One can be when you are onboarding many new senior leaders. And I think many of us on this call recognize that new senior leader integration it's a tough one, because you can have sort of organ rejection at the organizational level when a new senior leader joins. And so that might be a time when you're bringing on a batch of senior leaders. You could see a pull from the business saying, hey, how do we make sure we set these individuals up for success? So I think that is one point, a sort of a pivot point where you might see a request for an executive coaching program or partnership on thinking there. I think another point where you might see this is when you have major organizational changes. So for example, merger, acquisition, major restructuring of an organization, that could be a time when you also see a pull from the business, because this is sort of a period of great change, and you want to have your senior leaders partnered with executive coaches that can help them sort of navigate the complexity of a big change like this. And I would say the last place where I think you can see a pull from the business is going to typically be when there are quite a few career transitions happening in an organization, sort of similar to we've got a lot of new senior leaders coming in. If you have many longtime individual contributors now stepping into director roles, senior director roles, that could be a time to make sure that they have the right coaching partners in place. So those are sort of signals in the ecosystem that I tend to keep an eye out for, and that I've seen in the past make it sort of ripe for an executive coaching program or pilot in an organization.
That's fantastic. And bringing it further to life, if you put on 2020 vision and you think about your career, is there a time you wish you would have pulled the trigger on executive coaching to help in a situation? And maybe could you bring that a little bit to life for folks if they're thinking about their own organization right now and what they might be experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, happy to. I think one of the things that I would definitely, the reason why I sort of mentioned new senior leaders first is because I think that is a moment where it is useful to, I said this is not something that you want to push on an organization. It certainly doesn't stop you from having that conversation. So I think paying attention to when you have, I think some of us may have seen this in 2021 when there was quite a spike in hiring across the board. Across industries, we saw a spike in hiring. That might be that might have been a moment to sort of pull the trigger on developing an executive coaching program, which funnily that was when we started our partnership with Coach Source was around 2021, late 2021, I think. But I think that is always a moment to, even if it's not pulling the trigger, it's having the conversation with the right folks in the organization to see if now is the time, right? And sometimes organizational leaders may not see that. And talent leaders or HRBPs might be able to notice, wow, I'm seeing the landscape of our leaders really change, and this is perhaps a time to pull the trigger on our thinking around this. And I would add too that we shouldn't be afraid of the idea of piloting.
Yeah.
And so I offer that because sometimes it can really feel like we're all in or we're not doing this at all. And we should really use the opportunity, use the freedom that pilots provide us, right? You don't have to deploy an entire executive coaching program. You could literally pilot with a couple of leaders that you think would really benefit from this, and use that as an opportunity to get some data points and build some credibility for the program. Or you might learn, wow, this was not the right fit for us. So I would say leaning into pilots is something that is useful for talent leaders and HRBPs alike. So you don't feel this immense pressure of, oh, this program has to be incredibly successful. You are just piloting, and the worst case scenario, you roll it back. And so I offer that as a way to approach some of these programs that can feel more high stakes when they than they need to be. And there's an analogy that I really like using to help myself think about these things, asking myself and this is quoted from somewhere, I cannot remember who it's from, but is is this change that I am suggesting or encouraging us to deploy at the organizational level, is this a haircut? um, you know, in which case, oh, well, let me start with this. Is it a wig, right? Is it something that I can put on and I can take it off and no big deal, no harm done? Or is it a haircut? So there is a little bit of change and I kind of need to wait for it to grow out again, for it to be where I want it to be. Or is it a tattoo, right? Is it something that is a full on change that we cannot sort of roll back from, or it's going to leave a pretty big imprint on the organization. And I use those to help myself think about, when is the right time to do something.
I love that analogy. That's fantastic. That's going to stick with me now. And also your point about piloting is great too, because then again, as a partner, a coaching partner, we're learning, you're learning, we're helping you to be successful. So I like that you put that into the mix here for people to think about. Speaking of that, when HRBPs or talent leaders know or recognize, okay, we have one of these signals, maybe one of the signals, Dash, that you just mentioned, where it's time for us to leverage some executive coaching, how would you suggest those HRBPs or those talent leaders think about building a compelling case for executive coaching, for the investment in executive coaching to leadership at the organization?
Yeah, that's a big one, building the case for it. And this is where, if there is some pull from the organization, you have the traction going. But I think if you are building the case from scratch, I think one, being able to quantify the potential return on investment by investing in these leaders is pretty important. Once again, going back to this idea of new senior leaders, um, it is a costly endeavor to recruit senior leaders from where they are, a costly endeavor to then have them in an organization and then not be successful, right? Because they have a huge ripple effect on the organization as senior leaders. And then replacing them is very expensive, right? So thinking about what are the data points as you build your case that could be helpful in talking about, hey, this is the potential return on investment if we are able to successfully onboard our new senior leaders with executive coaching as an important tool for their success. So I think that's one thing. Quantifying as best you can. We all know in the talent space that can be trickier, but I think as best as you can, quantifying the potential return on investment. I think calling out the enhanced organizational performance that you expect to see from having an executive coaching program. So whether that is improved team performance, whether that is increased productivity, are your sales leaders going to be putting out higher revenue? Those are a few indicators that I would be looking at if you're attempting to build a case from scratch. Um, a couple of other indicators that I think can be useful is increased employee engagement and retention, right? So if you have better leaders in seats, that can lead to higher employee satisfaction, lower turnover. Once again, there's cost savings there when you have lower employee turnover. And then finally, I would say just overall improved leadership effectiveness, right? If you have leaders who have increased self-awareness about themselves, right? What am I working on? What are my strengths? Where can I lean into that? That is great for an organization's ecosystem overall, for your leaders to be more self-aware. But I think I would always start with attempting to quantify what is the potential return on investment. And sometimes it might be, I think we can get here, or I think we would be able to avoid all these costs if we invest in an executive coaching program or partnership for our senior leaders.
Can
And
I just jump
here,
in with a
oh,
question, just tack on to that, Dash?
go ahead, Mary.
So when you're talking about doing executive coaching for new senior leaders, and this is something that comes up all the time because of the retention issues, right? And the risk of somebody not being successful in a new role. Do you assign that immediately as they come in? Do you give them a time period of working in the organization before they start working with a coach? And my second question with that is just, is it mandatory or optional?
Yeah, all great questions, Mary. And I would say one of the sort of hallmarks of upstart culture is choice and
Mm,
empowering upstarters. And so for us, the approach we have taken is it's not mandatory, right? It is something that we don't come out of the gates and ask senior leaders that whether they wish to be partnered with a coach, etc. It's something that we let senior leaders join the company, get a lay of the land. And this is something, once again, going back to the value of the HRBPs, right? The HRBPs have a very close pulse on how the new senior leader is doing. They have a close pulse on how the manager of that new senior leader thinks they're doing. And
mm,
that is where those conversations happen around, hey, I think it would be really useful to partner this individual with an executive coach. So because of sort of the DNA in our culture of, it's choice, we want to make sure, and we're also big believers in not sort of applying a one size fits all approach
mhm.
to any of our programs, right? It's something where we want to make sure this makes sense for somebody. In some cases, you might have senior leaders who join a company and sort of immediately sort of like ducks to water, and they don't need this as an additional tool or support structure. And in other cases, you have senior leaders who do need it and want it, and their managers agree that, hey, this is something that is going to be useful. So that's generally our approach across the board with coaching at Upstart. It is not something that is mandatory. It is not handed down from on high. It is really something that comes out of conversations between the senior leader, their manager, and the HRBP. And then as a talent leader, I'm brought in to think about how we can support that.
Thank you.
Great question.
Um, Speaking of that, just I know we just talked about when leaders join an organization. Is it the same approach you take if you're thinking about succession planning or bringing someone else into, moving a director up into a VP role or VP up to SVP, something like that? Is that the same approach that you would also take at Upstart?
Yeah, it is definitely one where the manager of the senior leader or the soon-to-be senior leader plays a critical role in, right? They pay attention to, I am thinking about promoting this individual to the role of director or the role of senior director, and I would like to make sure that they have executive coaching to support them in this new role, this new set of responsibilities. And once again, it's something that the HRBP works very closely with them on to make sure that it feels like the right move for that particular leader. And then I come in as a talent leader to support that request and support that leader's engagement. And so yes, it's a very similar approach across the board. It's one that we rely heavily on the manager of the senior leader because we know they have the closest sense of that person's work, closest sense of the person's work. And importantly, when you're thinking about return of investment, the manager is most likely to see, right, the changes that senior leader is bringing to the table once they have an executive coach. And so they're a really important, an important linchpin in this whole system.
And do you often, when you're we talked about metrics and indicators and things like that. When you're deploying coaching and when you're using it, do you then, as a talent leader and or your HRBPs, do you then work with the manager to set some of those metrics for success or what success actually looks like? And can you walk people through that process as well?
Yeah, so for the majority of our senior leaders who work with our coach source coaches, I think we've been very lucky that the coaches are great about making sure that there is an alignment conversation that takes place at the beginning of any engagement. And this is really to make sure that the manager and the leader are really aligned about what the person is working on in this engagement. And that's a really useful opportunity to bring to light any sort of misalignment, any discrepancies between what the leader thinks they need to work on and what the manager sees as really important. And this is where having really skilled executive coaches who can help guide those conversations, so there is alignment when a leader starts working on this engagement with the coach. I think that is such an important piece of the puzzle, the alignment conversation between the manager, the senior leader, and their coach. And the coaches will typically close out the engagement with a similar conversation, which is less about alignment, but it's an opportunity for, once again, for this trio to come together and see what are the changes that we have seen, if any, um, post the leaders partnership with the coach. What are the changes they've seen? What are areas that still need digging into? And so now it is up to the senior leader and their manager to sort of continue to work on the areas that have been identified or sort of remain post the coaching engagement.
Fantastic. Um, Thinking through, and I don't know the answer to this question, but sometimes what we do with our clients is we'll help them do showcases internally to talk about the successes of the coaching engagements and where people began and where they got to, what the ROI was, all of those things. Do you do anything internally at Upstart to kind of shout about people's successes as they're going through these programs for them to talk about it? Is there an internal mechanism you might leverage?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Amanda. And I would say, Upstart were sort of a humble culture, and so I don't know about shouting about the achievements or the changes. I will say what is really powerful is at the end of the engagement when the senior leaders themselves are reflecting back on what they have, um, how they've grown as part of that experience, I think is very powerful. And that doesn't happen in some big public forum, right? It often happens in that conversation with the coach and the manager. And I think what is, um, you know, it's a really show don't tell. It is as a result of the engagement, seeing those changes in the leader, right? The manager is seeing the changes in the leader. I think that is the ultimate like testimonial. That is the ultimate success story. And I will share. I mean, one of my favorite moments in our coaching program has been where a manager of a senior leader reached out to me and said, hey, this senior leader on my team worked with a particular coach, and I've seen some really great changes, and I would love to extend this to another senior leader on my team. And in fact, is it possible to get the same coach for them? and those are moments, anecdotal and certainly qualitative, but those are moments where I think that it's very powerful, right? The voice of the manager of those senior leaders to be able to say, wow, I've seen so much change in this person, I would love to extend this to other members, other members of my team. And I think other anecdotal moments where you see this happening is where you have the senior leader themselves reaching out to me and their manager, and saying, gosh, this has been so helpful. Could we extend it for another 3 months? And so those are moments where I know, okay, this is doing what it needs to do. And so I would say it is a more show don't tell, right? It is how the leader is performing now. How is their manager viewing their performance? And how does the leader think about this engagement, right? Do they want more of it at the end of their engagement? So I think those are a few ways in which sort of the word sort of spreads at Upstart.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. I love the actual, how this actually works. I think that brings it to life for all the folks that are that are listening today. We've talked now about some success metrics and qualitative, quantitative, and we talked about AI. Is there anything else that you're thinking about looking ahead to envision the role or think about how executive coaching is evolving over the next couple of years that you think HRBPs and talent leaders should be aware of, or new trends or methodologies you're using internally when it comes to executive coaching and leadership development that you can share?
Yeah, I think a couple of things that I would share, and maybe this is something that I would say it's looking a little backward rather than looking forward at new trends. But and I think it's so common for us to really talk about like what is on the cutting edge. But I didn't want for us to leave this conversation without mentioning this, which is I think keeping in mind that coaching is not always a known entity to senior leaders.
Mm, mhm,
And so I wanted to make sure to share this with this audience because I think sometimes the assumption can be, hey, of course, a senior leader is really familiar with executive coaching. Of course, they think this is a good thing. Of course, they're going to be excited. And so, one of the things I think we should keep in mind as we're thinking about what is coming next and what are the trends, there are some foundational pieces that we need to do, continue to do as HRBPs or as talent leaders to make sure executive coaching is successful in our organizations, which is how we frame coaching to our leaders. Um, right there might be in, and you can see this, I think this is across the board, in different organizations you can see misunderstanding around coaching, right? Some people, it's an alarm bell for them, like, oh, I've been selected for a coach. What does that mean about their performance? So I think as talent leaders or HRBPs, framing this as an opportunity, an investment. It is a really exciting moment for a leader because this is a big accelerant. Um, and so that is one thing that I wanted to share. And then I think the other piece is helping frame for a senior leader what their relationship with a coach can be. So, for example, if you have a coach who has, if you have a senior leader who's never had an executive coach before, um, they may have a different idea of what that partnership is going to look like. So I will share an example in which we were working with a coach who had a particular methodology of coaching, as all coaches bring to the table, and that required sort of big chunks of a leader's time. And the leader sort of felt uncomfortable to say, "Hey, that doesn't work for me. I need you to be way more flexible about, meeting me where I'm at." And they had some nerves about that because they had this impression of the coach being sort of this authoritative figure in the relationship. And so one thing that I do now is I have these one-on-ones with every senior leader before they start their coaching engagement to say, just to be clear, tell me what you know about coaching, right? And sometimes they'll say, "Oh, I've had coaches before." And some will say, "I've never had a coach before." And they are relieved when you tell them, "Yeah, your coach, this coach is a partner to you. You own the success of this, right? So tell them what you need, right? If 90-minute blocks don't work for you, tell them." And uh, coach source coaches by and large are very flexible to meet you where you're at. And similarly, if there is a kind of coaching methodology that doesn't work for you, so some coaches, they use a lot of embodiment.
mhm,
Some clients don't love that. And, being telling them, giving them the permission to say, like, that's not working for me. Or I think we're talking about the same thing every time when we meet. So making sure, so I think looking ahead to trends is great and important as talent leaders, but we have to make sure we get the foundations right with our leaders who we work with so that they get the most out of the coaching experience. Otherwise, you could end up with a coaching experience coming to an end and someone feeling like, yeah, it was okay. And that is what I never want to hear. What I hope for is something really transformative. So Amanda, I took us on a journey. You had asked about looking ahead, but I was like,
I think that's perfect, because I think we're kind of coming to a little bit of a close with our conversation in terms of time. And I think there might be a couple questions from the audience. I'm not sure Mary will let us know, but I think that's perfect just to bring it back to the foundational pieces. And also, on the coach source side, as your partner, we're also there to partner with you to educate the organization too, to help make sure that people understand what coaching is. We do that with our clients. We can come in and have those conversations, even small roundtables with HRBPs and your population. So thank you so much for bringing that to light. Is there anything else before we open up the floor? And I know you have to get to your daughter's school, so thank you. But is there anything else? Is there anything else you want to share, or an actionable insight you'd like to share with the folks that are listening, or anything that hasn't been shared before we open up the floor?
Yeah, I would say typically the one thing that I would leave with this group is typically there are a couple of players in the executive coaching space in a given company, and it's typically going to be the HRBP and the talent leader. And so the main thing that I would leave with you is sort of keeping the lines of communication open in that space. So HRBPs are incredibly attuned to the needs of the business. So making sure that it's a partnership, and that you are keeping, as a talent leader, you are keeping them in the loop. And as an HRBP, you're reaching out to your talent leader to understand what are the different ways that you can support senior leaders. So making sure that there's a really tight connection between these two individuals or teams at a company, I think is really important for the success of senior leaders. This way, right, as a talent leader, you're not deploying something that doesn't make sense for the company. And as an HRBP, you're providing insights back to your COE so they can be deploying something that is meaningful to the company. So that's the one thing that I would share.
Fantastic.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dash. So we are, as Amanda mentioned, we are going to open up to your questions. So please use the chat or raise your hand, and we will we'll let you ask your question. And before we do that, we'll just remind our clients and not yet clients that CoachSource is here as a thought leadership and strategic partner. And if you want to talk further about your leadership development initiatives, you're welcome to reach out to me, Amanda, or if you're a current client, your CoachSource client service director. Our next First Friday will be Friday, December 6th at 11 a.m. Eastern. Our topic will be empowering people leaders, skills for scaling effectively in 2025. And as a reminder, a recording of this session, as well as recordings of all our prior sessions, are on our website at coachsource.com. So with that, let me see if there are any questions in the chat.
So Paula, hi Paula. There's a question from Paula, and she just wanted to know, Dash, do you use leadership assessment activities, and do you do that as part of coaching or before coaching, and also 360s?
Yeah, great question. And so prior to the engagement sort of kicking off proper, one of the things that the coaches will do is they will ask the senior leader that they're coaching for a few individuals where they can get some really meaningful feedback from. And it is typically going to be a manager, a direct report, could be a cross-functional partner. And so the coaches will do this work for us, where they will meet and have a conversation with those stakeholders, gather pretty rich feedback from those stakeholders, and then use that as a starting point for the coaching engagement. So we do leverage the CoachSource coaches to do that work for us. And sometimes the coach may recommend a particular assessment if they think that is going to be useful. And they do try and be flexible around what they think will work best for the leader. We've had some coaches use the Hogan assessment with our senior leaders. So it really depends on the leader that they're working with. But I'm very grateful that the coaches themselves do that. They don't sort of, they go to the heart of the matter, right? They're not depending on existing feedback. They want to hear directly from the stakeholders of the senior leaders. So they gather that. And I think that's a really useful exercise so that they have the most current feedback, current perspectives on that senior leader.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, I think you're referring to our IB 360 where our folks go in and have, do that 360 with a bunch of different stakeholders. I think there's a Dash, if you have time before you have to get across the street to your daughter's school, there's another quick question around for team success, what do you recommend that they do in the talent space to help the business right size?
Help the business right size in the talent space. And so I might ask, is it Ramona? I might ask for some further clarification there on what you mean. Is it in terms of once a team has been right sized, what we can do in the talent space to support?
We can unmute Ramona if she wants to come on live.
Or if she
Jason
wants
needs
to
to do
chat
that.
in. Okay, so
Oh,
when
wait, she
the
said yes. She said yes.
Yes, okay, gotcha, perfect. I think that is certainly something, you see in different organizations where there is a need for a restructure. And I think paying particular attention to where the now you have new leaders stepping in, taking on more work, more scope. I think those are moments, I think, once again, to work very closely with the HRBP and to check in. And I think some of this, and this is why I say the HRBP talent leader relationship is so important, right? Being able to check in, understand where the right sizing has happened, and ask them, like, hey, is this a place where we need to provide additional support, additional coaching for these particular leaders? And I think your HRBP usually will have a good sense of it. Or if they're not sure, they will go to the manager of that new senior leader, or maybe not a new senior leader, but of the senior leader who has now taken on new scope, new capacity, to see if that might be useful. And that is certainly a time where coaching can be really helpful as you're navigating a new organization, a new team, leading your team through change. So yeah, I would say, once again, going back to that tight relationship between the HRBP and the talent leader. And I will say a lot, sometimes I think we think about solutions being far more complex than they need to be. And I think investing in relationships at the organization, so that as a talent leader, you have a strong pulse of what is happening. And as an HRBP, you have an understanding of what you can programmatically offer your client groups. I think that's where going back to that close partnership really ensures the success of senior leaders at that company.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, I think, Dash, you have been so generous with your time, and we certainly don't want to keep you from a very important appointment that you have.
Awesome. Yeah, no,
I
thank you.
hope the 7-year-olds are easier on you than we were. So
Yes,
7-year-old popped up on candy.
they are so they're going to be post Halloween sugar high, so I might be getting either very exhausted 7-year-olds, or I'm going to be getting really excited 7-year-olds. But thank you so much for the opportunity and such great questions. What a fun way to start Friday.
Well, thank you
so much,
too.
Dash.
And thank you everyone for joining us. We will be sending out the recording, and we will see you again on the first Friday of December. Thanks, everybody.